Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first podcast that is going to be about Vaporwave. And today, I have a very special guest with me, uh, whom I spoke about very extensively in my last post. And he's essentially a music producer who mostly dabbles in Vaporwave and is actually pushing the frontier of Vaporwave. And is probably the best known for his hard vapor releases. So I'm really happy to introduce Wolfenstein wosX or wosX in short. So I'm really happy to have you here.
Yeah, good to be here.
Okay, I'm hoping that I'm not butchering your C name though. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
All right. So I'm going to start from a very beginning. Vaporwave. Now, what was the thing that actually intrigued you the most about vaporwave, and you chose it as sort of like a creative mechanism?
When I first heard about it, I just found the Macintosh Plus album on YouTube or something, and when I listened to it, I just thought it was uh, just a really interesting concept to make music. I didn't even realize it was slowed down 80s music at first. I just sort of enjoyed the sound of it itself.
Right.
Until I realized there was this whole like movement of taking old music and chopping it up and slowing it down, and I sort of got involved through that afterwards. And then I had never even made music before, or done any music production or whatever, so I just decided one day to just make a vaporwave album for the fun of it.
Yeah.
um, and then I released that in like August 2014, which is Delusional Reruns, which is just something I put together on Audacity.
Right.
And then, yeah, so that's pretty much how I started getting involved. And then just sort of over time, just started learning more and more about production. And now I just do it, I guess, seriously now.
Okay. And so before that, did you have any experience with music as a whole, or creating any other sort of music?
Not, yeah, I played piano for a bit on and off.
Okay.
I had piano lessons sometimes, um, but I never really pursued it. I did like in high school we had like a music workshop or something,
Right.
um, where we can learn how to write songs and whatnot. So I did that, but I never actually like thought about developing a career or like interest in music as a hobby in general,
Yeah.
until I started dabbling in vaporwave.
Right. And then I'm probably gonna go back to this afterwards. But in at least in your later releases, there's it's the fact that you are playing a lot of these parts yourself. Like it's clearly not just samples. Like you can hear a very
Yeah.
prominent melody that is clearly played with a MIDI controller or a MIDI keyboard. So
hmm
it's sort of again like a little bit of a new on take on the vaporwave music, sort of expanding it a lot more.
Yeah.
Right. And what about hard vapor? When did that come into being? Like, what was the thought behind that?
Well, when I started that, it was basically I was already in the mists of vaporwave scene in like 2015, and at that point, the scene was kind of like, the scene was very much together, but I didn't see much progression in the music really. There was a lot of ambient that was being released because of what 2814 did back earlier in the year, and at that point I was like still like into the ambient stuff. And then when you're thinking about how like, okay, well, you were taking just 80s pop songs and slowing them down, and now you're making fully composed ambient music, down tempo beats. It's pretty much, you can, if you're looking at it like that, with the aspect of it, having a sentimental value or a nostalgic factor. Um, it just sort of made sense. Well, you can kind of do it with any genre at that point. So I was
Right.
listening to a lot of, I just got into like rave music in general at that point and was just listening to that a lot. And then I just thought of the concept for End of World Rave, and I kind of wanted to do a rave theme album. But I wanted it obviously to sort of have that vaporwave style, I guess, where it was more slowed down. Because in general, like the rave music I was listening to was, around like 160 BPM um, stuff, and I sort of put it all down to around 110. And um, so yeah, that was kind of like what like launched that. And also just thinking about in terms of like, okay, if everyone's nostalgic for the 80s within the past 5 years, it only makes sense that at some point people are just going to be nostalgic for the 90s.
Right.
And so I just sort of took it upon myself to be like, okay, well, I feel like rave music in general is just going to make a comeback. So I can just, um, I mean, I didn't even know what I was getting into at that point. I didn't even think hard vapor would be a thing. I just sort of thought like, oh yeah, making slowed down rave music would be a cool vaporwave concept. And then it kind of just blew up into its whole own thing when like half the vaporwave scene tended to just despise everything about hard vapor as being like
Yeah.
the garbage music, which I didn't really understand, since these were producers who don't know anything about music to begin with and just chop up old songs, and then
Right.
I'm trying to like write original music and they're calling it shit. But it's like, all right, well, I mean, that's your opinion, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Well, but I mean that clearly paid off. I mean, End
yeah.
of World Rave was I mean, it was a notorious album, like
Yeah.
positively, and the backlash from the vaporwave community was insane about that. And well, that clearly showed that, this kind of progress, this kind of like shaking the genre up a bit is necessary for it not to get stuck.
Hmm.
And I can sort of draw parallels with other musical genres. Like I think heavy metal in specific, because I'm sort of familiar with the genre the most.
Mm.
Because for like the first 20 or 30 years, metal was pretty much heavy metal, and then the subgenres that didn't really, differ that much from the original core. And then I think maybe past 2000s, the music started, drawing a lot of inspirations from many different genres, and
Hmm.
it was more of a lot of people and a lot of hardcore fans of heavy metal music. They just completely dismissed it as not metal, and there was a similar backlash to that. But I think
Hmm.
that's sort of like a very necessary part in order for a genre not to like stagnate and be stuck in one place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
and
no, I was just gonna say it was funny, like talking, like relating to metal.
yeah,
Um, I always noticed that there was a bunch of people in vaporwave that also happened to be into metal as well, which I found to be an interesting correlation.
yeah,
Um, and I found it really funny when I did hard vapor. They like got really offended by what I was trying to do, like making fast, intense, like just hard music, I guess, in general. When these were like fans of heavy metal and those types of genres, where it's like, well, I mean, I don't understand why you choose not to like it when you can just incorporate that style into it. Like it's very much something that can be done, and I mean, it has been done also. Later on, people have incorporated metal into hard vapor a lot. Um,
right.
but I just wanted to bring that up because it was interesting seeing that a lot of people who were into metal seem to go from that to vaporwave.
Yeah, I mean, when you look from the outside, it seems like these two genres have nothing in common. I mean, they're so
Yeah.
radically different.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe one of the things that actually drew me very close, and when I first heard hard vapor as a thing, it really drew me like it really hit me home, and I guess that's why because it was sort of the atmosphere, at least, well, especially the atmosphere in your End of the World Rave, like that was very
Hmm.
dark and very melancholic and very doom like. I would even feel to say the uncut like this feeling of dread and certainly the campaign of End of World Rave and the whole thing with the Croco crew and so much.
Yeah.
I mean, that was how much do you think did that contribute to the album's success?
Probably like I wouldn't say like it contributed to its success, but I would say it definitely contributed to its notorious. What do you call just
Just
its
notoriety.
notoriety?
Yeah.
Yeah. um, because just when I was doing that, I mean, the whole point I was trying to do was just to fuck with the vaporwave scene, just because of how like it became like so closed off and niched at one point, and like just everyone was doing the exact same thing and not doing anything. And then I just decided to like just completely fuck with it and just think like, oh yeah, what if these Ukrainian gangsters invaded the scene? Like, how would these kids react to that? And they just flipped out most of the time. Um, and the thing was, is like a lot of people um, would just get like offended for like I don't know, just be offended about like me appropriating Ukrainian culture in that way. And I mean, I've dealt with that a lot just like this past year. I mean, I know many Ukrainians now within the hard vapor scene, and I've released a lot of albums on Antifer from them. But
Okay. Yeah.
I, I still get like people saying that like, oh, like just all of hard vapor is just fake and blah 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 and all this shit, and it's like you're just appropriating and abusing a culture, but like at the same time they're appropriating Japanese culture and doing, you know, just the same Japanese text without actually putting any meaning or depth as to what that culture signifies or represents. Because I'm Slavic myself, of like blood from, you know, my family. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, and it's just the same thing when I did hard vapor. I didn't want it to just be like, oh yeah, we're just doing, instead of Japan, we're doing like Slavic things now. But I wanted it more to be uh, like a globalized viewpoint of just incorporating all cultures that were involved in the scene, um, which I felt like was an important thing. And that's why I did Brazil World Cup also as well later on, because there was a huge Latin American influence in vaporwave, I noticed. And it's cool to see them implement their own culture into it now, because at first it was just, you know, the same um, appropriation of the Japanese text and whatnot. But then you see things like cumbia wave, like Latin wave, and all this interesting stuff where the sample base is very much like these um, like just old local music recordings. I don't even know where it comes from, but it's just very
Right.
interesting stuff to see.
Okay, the instruments that are usually used by the inhabitants of essentially South America and Latin America and the the instrument use, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course, well, I was about to ask, like, I mean, the influence, especially the influence to draw influence from the Slavic countries and especially Ukraine. I was I was about to ask you whether you ever visited a like a Slavic country or a post-Soviet country
Uh,
before.
yeah. I visited Czech Republic. I was I'm actually going to Poland later this year, and I've heard a lot of stories because my aunt used to live in Russia, like right after the Soviet Union fell, when it was
Okay.
really corrupt.
Hmm.
So I've heard some interesting stories there. Um,
Oh
just
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, because I'm myself from a post-Soviet country, and well, the
yeah,
country that was incorporated in Soviet Union, and yeah, like the '90s was an interesting time, man. Like,
yeah,
so and that's I thought, because I sort of like tracked down that you yourself live in Canada right now, if I'm correct,
hmm
and that reading, especially reading the story behind End of World Rave, the story
hmm
that sort of went with the album. I read it, and it essentially it added a lot to the experience of listening to the album itself, very much so. And it was
okay,
written in a very authentic way. I sort of thought that, well, the person that written this certainly sort of knew what he was talking about. Like, it was not like some American was just writing about what he imagined a post-Soviet or Slavic country would look like in the
yeah,
90s. And so this was very surprising to me, and so that's why I was really interested to just ask you that. And well,
okay,
that clearly answers the question then. So yeah,
yeah.
really good job on that. Like, the atmosphere is top notch in that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so if you'll ever interested in visiting like another post-Soviet country, you're happy to come to Lithuania. Like, there is also
Oh
some
yeah,
relics from those times left, and it's quite interesting. Again, of the same, it adds to the atmosphere of the set times.
yeah, for sure.
Now,
I mean, I want to like just travel everywhere pretty much.
okay, yeah, then that's good. That's great. Now, what do you think? What do you think about the ideology that is attached to the vaporwave genre as a whole? And well, I'm mostly talking about the anti-consumerism and sort of like Marxist ideas behind that.
hmm
Do you think that it is a crucial part of vaporwave, or the genre should? I mean, the genre can be alive without the underlying ideology.
I mean, I think that like the reason that got tied into it, like it's the main theme of the genre itself, was because of like a certain amount of releases that came from Vaporwave's creation just simply had that theme in mind. So it kind of became like just the umbrella um, explanation for what Vaporwave was, because of all these early releases and how they were very much into the anti-capitalist themes.
Right.
Um, so I don't think it's necessary at all for if you're making a vaporwave album for it to be any uh, have any political theme whatsoever. But I think that due to the fact of just its nature of what it is as a music genre, where you're taking slowed down smooth jazz, which is like the most corporate music you could possibly find, and turning that into something experimental. I mean, in a way, it is just anti-corporate in general. I mean, you're literally just stealing music, right? And like repackaging it to
Yeah.
sell to different people. I kind of find it funny, though, that it started off as being this anti-corporate capitalist thing, but I find in the vaporwave, especially now, vaporwave scene, um, it's become like almost the exact opposite of what it wanted to be. Like, it's probably the most corporate, capitalist scene I've ever seen in like the internet culture. Just like
Okay.
all these vaporwave labels with cassette tapes selling merchandise and all this crap that like you don't really need. It's just, I mean, I don't really mind it, but it is very capitalistic in
Yeah.
that sense, where you're just taking music made from someone else and like chopping it up and then putting it on cassette to sell to everyone, and then you're making like hats or vinyls and all this other shit to go along with it.
Right.
um,
Yeah.
I just find it kind of funny that that's how it's sort of devolved into. um, but I mean, I sell merchandise myself. I don't see any problem with it, but especially if you're in a genre that claims to be anti-capitalist, it just seems to kind of go against the point of doing that, you know?
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's absolutely the case. Like again, I can only probably mention heavy metal as as another genre which has like very much it is prone to ideology. It was not the case, I
Hmm.
think, at the beginning years of heavy metal, but later on, like you got all of these subgenres which just sprung and had different ideologies, and some of them were very much, almost like an antithesis to one another. Like, for example, you had black
Hmm.
metal, which was, and all of its subgenres, which were ranging from satanic to even national socialistic, and then
Hmm.
you had like sort of like a backlash of Christian black metal, which was
Yeah.
a complete antithesis to what it was standing. And so I guess it might be the case with every like larger genre that encompasses many different subgenres and may be prone to ideology just to shift through different ideas and then some of them just even opposing each other and at this
Yeah.
case. Yeah. And so you touched a little bit about the change in vaporwave, in essentially the essence of vaporwave as going from this anti-capitalistic genre to becoming almost like a almost like a fad, to a large extent.
Hmm.
And what about the community? Like, do you have any opinion on that?
All right. Yeah. I mean, the community, I'm not like, I mean, I was involved in the vaporwave scene. Now I'm kind of just, I don't know, in my own type of scene, which is kind of branched off, which I guess you would call it the hard vapor scene, but I
Right.
don't even know really what it is. It's just kind of like a bunch of different producers from Dream Catalog, mostly, kind of just working together. I call it more just like the the off branch of vaporwave, or like
Yeah.
the survivors, I guess. But I don't know. But yeah, the vaporwave community is what it is now. I'm not like the biggest fan of. Um, I mean, a lot of the people into it are just, like I said, just still doing the exact same thing. They're not like progressing or trying to do something different. I mean, I check like the vaporwave Reddit every now and again, and there's like, I don't know, just nothing new has been going on at all since I basically left the scene. Uh,
Right.
which I guess which is normal for it. I see it like very much becoming more mainstream and conventional within the last few years. Just a whole different crowd um, is getting involved, which I think is good and bad in some ways. I mean, once it becomes more mainstream, it's just going to invite more people that we probably wouldn't want, like this whole alt-right fash wave thing, but I don't think that'll last very long. It just seems kind of more of a fad.
Yeah.
Um, and then, but I mean, I'll check it. I don't really listen to vaporwave that much anymore, but I'll check out some stuff that comes out on Bandcamp every once in a while just to see what's going on. Um, but I mean, I still enjoy it from time to time, but it's more of kind of like a passing thing. It's not something like I'm really involved with at the moment. I'm mostly involved with, I mean, my side of the scene with most things.
Right. Yeah. And it sounds to me like the I've watched a video that you released not so long ago about essentially how you redefined the genre name of vaporwave into just vapor, and then
Yeah.
you sort of explained the rationale behind that, and that sort of vaporwave could be thought of as a subgenre of a larger umbrella term of vapor. And
Hmm.
sort of, it sounds to me like you also think that, well, it would be sort of like a wise idea to just have like these, well, the community that you spoke about seems like this more of a explorers of the vapor side of vaporwave, so to speak, and then the
Yeah,
rest of the community is more grounded in vaporwave and then the conventional, sound of vaporwave.
yeah. And that's what I mean, because when I did Hard Vapor, everyone was so pissed off about it because they didn't want Vaporwave to change into something else like that. They wanted to keep it as it was, so that's why, I just said, well, you have this word, you have wave, which can be applied to anything,
Yeah.
like dark wave, new wave, whatever. So what is vapor in front of that? I mean, that you can't just like color genre vaporwave when, like, I don't know if that makes sense, but like when you have like wave, it's usually something that comes afterwards. So like vaporwave is
Right.
like the afterwards of vapor. So what is vapor in the first place? So that's why I kind of did that, and I think it worked out better in that way because now I don't have to constantly push myself into the vaporwave scene. I'm kind of like have this umbrella term that you can kind of just, oh yeah, attribute to both hard vapor or vaporwave, and both of them can be under the same term together, but they don't have to mesh together anymore, which I think is better in my case in both the vaporwave scene in general, since uh, they're very much not interested in having hard vapor be a part of their scene. But I
Right.
think that's changing though. The more I post my music in the vaporwave Reddit, more often people upvote it. Whereas last year before, like I put something on there and it's like immediately 5 down votes.
Okay.
Like you can get anything in there, and then now it's like, doing, I guess decently, maybe like 1 or 2 upvotes if I'm lucky.
Okay, well, I mean that's a slow progress, but I mean that's usually how it goes with the genres that are more interesting than just the conventional. Like people are always more prone to listening to a conventional and sort of like a traditional sound, and to start exploring, they need some time to adapt to a new sound in order to appreciate it
Hmm.
afterwards. I think it's usually the case.
Yeah.
And well, it's not a really much of a surprise, but vaporwave is essentially an internet genre. I mean, this is where it was where it originated, and there were attempts to bring vaporwave into real world. I would say, like to actually
Hmm.
have some live performances of vaporwave, or at least like organize like these little parties where vaporwave music would be playing and people of a similar mindset would be hanging
Hmm.
in. And what do you think, is that possible in the future? To would it be possible to sort of bring vaporwave into a real world and turn it into an actual gig, like especially with hard vapor, because it seems a lot more, especially that it's grounded in rave music, which is essentially composed just for that, just for partying.
Hmm.
Would it be possible to sort of try and organize like a gig of hard vapor somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I've done shows before where I've played hard vapor,
Okay.
but like an actual like hard vapor event, like in full, I mean, I've done, but I wouldn't really call it that. I just kind of did something with a friend of mine, and he had like other musicians on, and the music they played, I wouldn't consider hard vapor really, but I mean, it was a fun night. It was mostly like vapor trap and stuff like that. But I've seen
Okay.
vaporwave type of shows before. Um, where I live in Montreal, they have like visuals come in, like visual artists who present their work on like the projector, and then they'll have like a DJ playing the music, which is usually just like lo-fi chill beats. Um,
Right.
so I've seen stuff like that, um, but I've never seen like a full like vaporwave event, like a big showcase at like a big festival or something like that, which I mean, I'm probably not going to see anytime soon. Maybe I would say probably like within the next year. If vaporwave keeps going how it is, it'll probably end up becoming more mainstream in that sense. Um, but then again, it's not really a dancey type of genre, which is
Yeah.
why, I mean, that's also another reason why I started Hard Vapor, was to sort of like get that branch of the the danciness, I guess, aspect into it, but
Hmm.
also tying that ambient side and sort of meshing the two together. So it's kind of like something you can listen to when you're just at home relaxing, but you can also play it in a club and it'll
Okay.
have the same effect, I guess, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And that's what you get, like especially from listening End of World Rave. Like it's usually the structure of the songs is usually based that the first part of the song is beat heavy.
Hmm.
There's a certain beat that is continuous throughout the track, and then you sort of gradually flow into this ambient and very authentic vaporwave sound
Hmm.
of just synthesizers and ambient behind it. And what was the reception of the people that were in the party when you were playing Hard Vapor? Was there any sort
um,
of questions or something like this?
Not really. I mean, the thing was, when I did the event, it was at like a club, and I got like kind of a. I mean, I just didn't really organize my time well, and got kind of a bad time slot. So I kind of like did it towards the end when everyone kind of left, even though there was like a few people. But the people there already know all about like who I am. They're just like my friends. They know my music, so there
Okay.
wasn't really much surprise. But I think like the few people that were in there just randomly, I wasn't really paying attention, but uh, they seemed to enjoy it, I guess. Um, I didn't really see much like calamity, just kind of people like bobbing their heads to the music. It was kind of a slow night in general, like a Tuesday night. So, I mean, I don't think anyone was keen to party that night, but
Right.
I think it went over well. I just want to, yeah, I'd have to like have a real gig with like actual people coming to dance and try to party to see how Hard Vapor would work, and I think it would. Um, I mean, I don't think it's really that complicated to have music that's danceable, especially when you have, the ambience on top of it. It sort of adds, I think, at least another level to the experience of going out to a club and dancing, because I feel like there is. Um, when you're dancing in that environment, there's sort of a transcendent feeling at some points. I feel like um, you're just getting so lost in the rhythm and just feeling the music. And when you have elements of ambient and strong melodic structures in it, it just creates more of. I mean, it's different for everyone, but for me, it would be more of a spiritual experience, I guess, in terms
Right.
of
Yeah.
that side of things.
Yeah. I would definitely agree on that, and that sort of ties in with your argument that it's the hard vapor as a music genre is sort of diverse in a way that you can listen to it at home, just lying on your bed and closing your eyes and listening to it, and it wouldn't be out of place. And you can
Hmm.
also party to it, and yeah, that's sort of it brings a lot more than just the amphetamine induced rage
Yeah.
and so it's sort of a lot more versatile in that respect.
Hmm.
And you said that you do not listen to hard vapor that much nowadays, but do you still have like some producers of vaporwave that you enjoy, or you just listen to something that was released like a couple of years back?
Um, no, no. I mean, I listen to a lot of. I mean, I should have clarified. I listen to mostly hard vapor now.
Okay.
Um, but I mean, I'm just sort of going like all over the place with my music. I mean, I'm listening to as much as I can just to get inspiration from anywhere I can. Um, but within vaporwave specifically, trying to find artists that are, I guess, good and relevant now. I mean, there's this guy who does like these improvs on SoundCloud,
Mm-hmm.
um, who's pretty cool. He's kind of underrated. His name's Dank Vibes. I'd recommend him.
Okay.
Um, he does interesting stuff. It's very like, um, I mean, I don't know how to describe it, but like he does a lot of ambient stuff, which I find interesting. And then there's also, I guess I'd say Dan Mason is a good vaporwave producer I'll listen to sometimes. And then,
Mm-hmm.
but that's really about it. I don't really listen to much other than that, unless, I mean, someone tells me that there's like a good new vaporwave release out to check out, but I haven't gotten that in a while. Um, I feel like a lot of the main like talented producers that were involved in vaporwave have moved on to other things now,
Okay. Yeah.
which I guess sad to see, but I mean it's cool to see them, trying out new things instead of just constantly doing the same like just 80s synth ambient stuff. Um,
Yeah, but
but
yeah, but that's completely understandable. Probably, like
yeah,
if the person is open minded and is sort of ready to go around in different directions. That's well, at least for me, that seems like I do appreciate that
hmm
in the music artists because well, it's sort of I do not understand the word consistency in music so much. Like that doesn't mean
yeah,
anything. Like if the person is consistent in the music, that means there's no progress in his music. Although
yeah,
the fans of the music might be happy when he's churring, album after album that sounds similar,
hmm
but I mean that's really not progressing at all,
yeah,
in my
for
opinion.
sure.
And do you have any examples of some artists that started in vaporwave and then moved on to some other genres that you think that did some good job in that?
Yeah, there's several. I mean, I wouldn't say they've like changed genres, but I feel like they've defined their own sound to the point where it's kind of like separate from vaporwave at this point. I guess a good example is Telepath,
Okay.
um, who's done, I guess, vaporwave for a while, but the music that he makes is so beyond what vaporwave is to me, in terms of just that's simply what it is ambient music, but there's a very spiritual feeling to his music that's I find hard to find in other people's music. There's he's his new album on Dream Catalog is a really good example of that in terms of his skill and music ability. Um, yeah, it's just very interesting. And then HKE is also another one who's definitely turned around completely music
Right.
style wise. Um, who started off with as his first name Hong Kong Express with just basic like down tempo vaporwave beats with like
Right.
ambient. Now it's like his Dragon Soul and Omnia, which are both completely different in style, especially Omnia, which is very dark and just chaotic and crazy to listen to, which is very
Okay.
interesting experience. Um, and then some other producers. There's producer Jude Frankham, who goes by Remember on Dream Catalog, who's done ambient stuff, but he's I think he's rooted in metal as well. He's a guitarist, um, and his sound's definitely evolved greatly within the past 2 years. I'd say, starting off with just like sort of 2814 like ambient, and sort of moving more into, I guess it's like still ambient, but the tone of it is very much different, where he includes guitars and different types of drum beats. Um,
Right.
so yeah, just interesting to see all those styles sort of develop into their own. I mean, I can't say that their own genres, but definitely the sound that those artists give off are very unique. sort of genreless in their own.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's even I wouldn't even dare to say that your music is sort of genreless in that way as well.
Mm.
The essence is still vaporwave, but like and this is what essentially when I listened, well, the first album that I listened was End of World Rave, and then I sort of moved around and checked other albums as well. And clearly, I was always surprised because every single album was, different in its own sort of like a little bit of an area that was explored, and that album was completely different from another one. And it
Mm.
sort of ties with the consistency argument as well, that there's sort of the core is the same, but then the area that is being explored around is very diverse. And so it's also, well, it's really nice to just see artists, and the ones that you've mentioned as well, that are just not bounded by the genre, and exploring, different areas as well.
Hmm.
This is clearly, I think that brings artistic merit as a whole. And well, speaking about that, do you think that, sampling as a method of creating vaporwave, is it necessary anymore, or is it just like
Um,
a relic?
yeah, I think, yeah, I'd agree. It's kind of a relic at this point. I mean, I don't want to say like, I feel like that, uh, like the essence of what vaporwave was, which was, taking other music and slowing it down, kind of like this thing that anyone can do. It was very DIY punk type of stuff. I think that aspect will never really die fully. Um, but I feel like in terms of vaporwave being taken seriously, in terms of like serious releases coming out and being recognized, um, the ones that are purely sample based tend to get focused on less and less, and the ones that are original compositions tend to get focused on more and more. So I feel like that, just in general, that's the general trend I feel it's going to start heading towards, which is just original music. Um, so I feel like the idea of slowing down music or just sampling in general is kind of like just like, I feel like the way to look at it is more of how music in general just works, like just in a literal sense, where you're being inspired by something before you and you're recontextualizing it, you're repackaging it into something new, which is
Right.
all music in general, is just, relying off the past and making it into something new. When vaporwave was that idea, but in a literal sense, to sort of illustrate that this is how music and how new music ideas are created. Um, so I feel like in terms of it moving forward and how music is already changing so much, in terms of like how genres are being marketed, it just feels like the whole idea of sampling is kind of like it's served its purpose as to what it tried to explain in music. And I feel like in the future it'll just be more composition based, like very heavily composition, sort of, and people listening to albums that they appreciate because of what went into the writing of it, the production of it.
Right.
They're not listening to it because it's put out there by the music industry, or because it's something that's deemed popular. They're listening to it because it sounds good. Um,
Right.
I mean, I'm kind of saying like a lot of different things. It's kind of hard to explain this. Um, but I just feel like the future in general is just composition based music.
Yeah, but
Uh,
even now, I think it's quite largely felt. Like the new
mhm.
releases, and especially in like Dream Catalog, you have the releases that, well, at least even if there are samples that are being used, they are processed so much that sometimes you do not even recognize that they're samples anymore. And
Yeah.
well, I mean, talking about your own music, like I don't think like in the End of World Rave or like other albums, one of the more recent releases, like there aren't any samples. At
Hmm.
least I did not recognize any. So this is sort of like
No.
showing. Yeah. Okay. So that's sort of like it's already a trend. I think
Yeah.
like that's going on already, and surely that's one of the steps towards vaporwave being and vapor as an umbrella genre being a lot more taken a lot more seriously, and
Hmm.
moving sort of from its almost like a gimmick nature or meme nature
Yeah, exactly.
that is tied to it. Yeah.
But
And
yeah, and
yeah.
there's a lot of stigma because yeah, just people don't really, especially just like the average person you're talking to about this, they're not gonna like their initial impression of the genre is gonna affect them so much as to how they like appreciate it. I remember like I was talking to this friend. I mean, he's not really a friend. I just kind of knew him from elementary school, and we were talking about like vaporwave. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, I guess I'm kind of involved. And he was like, oh yeah, so you just like make meme music. Wow, you just make meme music. And then he like walked away, and I was like, okay, that's not what I do, but all right. I mean, if you want to like think that and assume that of my music without
Right.
actually listening to it, then go for it. Which is kind of annoying that people just are so closed-minded about that,
Yeah.
where they have their initial impression of things and they just see that as, oh yeah, this is all it is. Um, and I think that's kind of like the same with basically any genre. I mean, dubstep is like one of those examples, I feel like, where, I mean, just like the average listener to music or whatever will listen to like some, like just any electronic song or any electronic song that isn't dubstep at all, but just call it dubstep anyways because they like, oh yeah, Skrillex's dance music. Oh yeah, all that new dubstep crap is coming out. I hate all of it. You know,
Right. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
so I feel like it's the same thing with vaporwave now. It's like, oh yeah, you make vaporwave. Oh yeah, you just fucking steal music and slow it down and make meme shit. Like, all right, I guess.
Yeah. But that's yeah. That's a pretty strong. Well, I mean, uh, I guess another way is that you cannot expect all the people to actually that are especially the people that are not interested in the genre itself, like they just heard about the genre from 9gag or Facebook, and
Yeah.
that's the only piece of information that they've got about the music, so it's sort
Yeah.
of like well, you probably just have to tolerate that, like in a way
Hmm.
that, well, they don't really know better. And have you ever tried to like explain to these kind of people, like that it's more than just a meme, and there's actual serious like scene involved in that?
Yeah. No, I've done it before. I mean, it sometimes goes over well, but in that one specific case, the guy was just like didn't listen to me, which I just found frustrating, and I just didn't really talk to him the rest of the night, anyways. But I mean, that's
Right.
his
Well,
problem mostly.
yeah. Well, that's a clear example of closed-mindedness. Yeah.
Yeah.
And your new album, Deconstruction of Mind,
Mm.
like I've listened to it a couple of times, and I think it was certainly a very interesting, well, and as always, as I mentioned before, it was a very different release again compared to the
Hmm.
other ones, and like especially comparing it to End of World Rave, like it was a lot more. I would even say serious in that respect. Like End of World Rave was sort of like it was clear that it was sort of like a reworked version of like sort of like an exaggerated picture of a rave, or a little bit of a processed
Hmm.
picture of a rave, but you sort of saw like these influences, and sort of saw the whole concept as almost like a reworking of a rave scene, and with
Hmm.
Deconstruction of Mind, it's a lot more like almost like an honest, a very much a serious output that stands on its own without no ties to anything else.
Hmm.
And it was certainly, and I think it was one of the, well, I'm not really sure, but I think it was one of the more complex piece of works that you've created in the past.
Mm.
Like especially the series of which I especially enjoyed the sequence of like 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah,
Oh, that, yeah.
yeah. It was really like dissonant, but at the same
Hmm.
time, like there was this underlying, almost like a carnival feel about that, and it
Yeah.
was extremely interesting. So tell me more about that. Where did you draw? Like, what was the thought process behind this album, and what were your main inspirations for it?
I mean, that was more of a personal album. It's just something I wanted to put together in terms of just myself. I've had like anxiety and depression stuff before, and just sort of overcoming that. Um, and the process of that through music, I guess, which is what I tried to recreate, which is sort of like spiraling into like I guess, I mean, the first track is Negative Thought. You sort of, I wanted it to sort of like start off with the idea of like being sunk deep into, whatever negative headspace I could have been in. And I mean, I made it sort of open for anybody who can who's experienced something like that, to sort of re-experience that same feeling. Um, so that's kind of what it was based off of. So like the first half is, I guess, the negative side of things, and then the second half is sort of like the overcoming of it and sort of moving beyond. Sort of just, it's more uplifting, obviously. Um,
Right.
and for I guess, the carnival section, I mean, I just sort of like pictured that as like, like the bottom point, like the low point where you're just sort of like meddling in this like weird headspace where you're not really sure if it's normal or if it's really weird or if it's, you're feeling like shit or you're just feeling like nothing. I don't know. It's
Right.
like that sort of, yeah, just
Well,
sort of craziness, I guess.
yeah, it does sort of sound like almost like a mixed bag of emotions, just bashing you from all sides, and you're not quite
Hmm.
catching and hanging on to one of them. And wow, yeah, I mean, now that you explain it, it sort of makes sense now. In retrospect, that
Hmm.
the album sort of does portray this sort of, and it certainly explains why it does sound a lot more serious, as I said,
Hmm.
and you know as for example, a regular vaporwave listener, do you think that essentially the negativity or the darker themes that are explored, especially in hard vapor and just other vapor genres that are meddling in that, do you think that you know maybe the is community accepting of that, or not so much, like the negativity that comes with it, more of a
Um,
introspection?
I think honestly, like, it wasn't even the negativity that dissuaded people. I think it was more just the fact that it was like the style of music in general that put people off. Because to be honest, I mean, I've heard a lot of like vaporwave that's been like popular, which I find to be negative in spirit. Just like you just feel like weird listening to it. Like it just puts you kind of in a bad place. Um, but I mean, I guess that's just a subjective term as to what negative means. Um, so I think like there was an aspect of the negative side of hard vapor that I feel like turned people off, which is the aggressive tone of it. Um, and I mean, I guess that's understandable because vaporwave wanted to be like a very nice, harmonious internet
Yeah.
scene. But yeah, and then what was I gonna say? Um, yeah, I just feel like a lot of people just have a very subjective view as to what negative music sounds like to them. Because I feel like it's different for everyone. But I feel like, I mean, there's obviously, you can write melodies that are darker and melodies that are more uplifting. But even when you're writing those, you can make those, like you can make moody melodies that are very dark and in their tone, but make it sound more uplifting. And same thing with melodies that are uplifting. You can sort of twist them around in the production to make them sound more creepy and sort of more dissonant. I mean, you see that in like horror movies a lot, where you have
Yeah.
like the little girl singing like the show tune or whatever, and it's just really creepy and negative, even though it's, you know, in like quotes, a positive song.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think one example that pops into my mind was the track from End of World Rave, which was one of the last ones, Crocodile. I think that was that
Oh
one.
yeah.
It was the underlying melody, is sort of like it's in a major tone, roughly speaking, but it's
Hmm.
completely messed up, like
Yeah.
absolutely just the bottom of it whole, all like the last the last point
Yeah.
throughout that journey. And well, I guess that's the beauty of music, that and I think this is what we have in possession as an as electronic music producers,
Hmm.
have this sort of tool to turn major tones via production into something that sounds foreboding and negative and
Hmm.
uneasy. Which, for example, classical music composers, they have an instrument, and well, sometimes they manage to do that, but it's very rarely. It's usually the negativity or positivity is being produced mainly by tone and the
Yeah.
intonation. And with electronic music, you sort of have another almost layer to produce a specific emotion with a piece of music, which
Hmm.
just shows that a lot of people, again, sort of like the similar people that are thinking of vaporwave just as an internet meme and so on, and all the electronic music is dubstep, is that electronic music has a lot to offer in that respect. Like
Hmm.
in a lot of people are saying that, well, it's not really a real music. You're just playing this music with a computer. It's not
Yeah.
even real music, especially comparing it to like classical music or rock or jazz or whatever.
Hmm.
So it sort of seems to me like there's so much to explore in electronic music in that respect.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I don't understand. I get into like, I mean, not fights, but like arguments with some people about that, about how like electronic music isn't real music, quote unquote. Um, which I guess if you want to look at it like that, it can be something that's very conventional. Like someone can make something very easily on a DAW, and just, I guess I call it like painting by numbers. Taking something that's been done like hundreds of times and just relying on those conventions and just literally copying them. I
Right.
don't really call writing music. You're just sort of like reiterating it. It's sort of like equivalent to like getting a guitar and like learning how to play a specific song and like playing that song and then calling it, oh yeah, this is my song. I wrote this.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so, but at the same time, with electronic music and the technology, you can pretty much create any style of music you want. Like the possibilities are endless in terms of what kind of style you want to create and what kind of mood and intentions, and it's just so vast and infinite. Um, I just don't understand when musicians close themselves off from that world, and just, I mean, I don't have anything wrong with, bands and whatnot, but to me, just the aspect of, being able to open up the project file and just literally just write music the like any way I want to. Um, and I mean, I have like a piano, and that's how I mainly do my melodies, is just doing improvisation on that. Um, so, uh, and I got into, not an argument, but like I talked to this like a friend of my dad's or something, and he was talking about how like, oh yeah, you can never have like blues or jazz or rock and electronic music. You never have that same feeling. And then I was like trying to and I guess not argue with him, but like just sort of uh, get a different insight that you can actually put those genres in there. It's just not many people choose to do that. They choose to go a more easy way, do something that's sort of already been done before in electronic music, go with conventions,
Hmm.
uh, stick with something like trap or dubstep or house or whatever, and just make. I mean, it just bothers me greatly when a musician only makes one genre of music, one style, one sound. It's
Hmm.
like I can't even like imagine myself doing that. Like I would just go insane if I had to just make the same exact song every
Yeah.
single time.
Hmm.
It's a foreign concept to me. Um, but I feel like uh, there's overall just in the future there's going to be a new attitude to what electronic music can bring, because it's not just EDM that it'll make. You can make a symphony on a DAW for
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
Ableton. You know what I mean? Like you can
Hmm.
do anything you want really. The fact that people are closing themselves off from that world just doesn't make sense to me when there's just so much you can do. Um,
Oh yeah, absolutely. And sort of a good example of that is sort of like a recent trend where a lot of like academic jazz musicians and jazz composers are actually like incorporating a lot of electronic music elements into their
mhm,
music, and that's sort of becoming more and more prevalent. Well, it took
mm,
a while, of course, for them to realize that it's a fairly useful tool, for music creation and exploration, especially. But it's sort
yeah.
of becoming even accepted in academic terms. So,
Okay.
like, I was very surprised at first, but it does sound like, well, finally, electronic music sort of has become,
Yeah.
transcendent its stigma in that respect.
Yeah. That's interesting because I remember when I was in school, I took a jazz history class, and I mean, our teacher was very much. I mean, I he didn't like make it apparent he was against electronic music, but he didn't make it seem like he was a big fan of it either.
Right.
Um, when he's talking about like pop music and all that, and how if there's like the new jazz musicians and how they're using real instruments or whatever, and how yeah, so you could tell he was like very much not really into electronic music. But I've never heard of electronic styles being implemented in jazz, especially in academics before, because I know Miles Davis did some electronic jazz with like hip hop beats at one point. He tried to do something, but that was sort of later on in his career, I guess, where he kind of didn't have much uh,
Like his
vitality, I guess.
Yeah, his reputation was already set. Like he didn't have much
Yeah,
to lose at that point.
yeah.
Yeah, well, that's. But again, like I guess one of the things is that started to appear when the standard notation of music. The composers actually started incorporating like different symbols into their notation.
Hmm.
That actually, for example, a specific sound that is. They just write a specific wavelength on top of that, which should be played, and so they even sort of like invented a notation that should be used in order to sort of pass it as a academically accepted sort of material, and it stuck.
Hmm.
So it's sort of funny in that way as well, because it sort of, before it was noted, it was thought of as not fit for an academic environment. But then
Yeah,
whenever it was sort of put into a box that academic musicians created, it was accepted. Sort of funny in
yeah,
that way.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, um, yeah, I was just gonna say, like about jazz in general. I always try to incorporate jazz into my music often, just because I'm a big fan of it. And yeah, it's just funny to see like there's so many elitists about jazz in general. Like whenever you try, especially me when I was trying to do jazz. I mean, I'm not like an amazing musician, and I was like working hard on trying to practice. But when I would do these improvisations, people would complain like, "Oh yeah, why are you trying to be like a jazz musician? Like you can't be like the greats or whatever." Blah 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 blah. But it's
Yeah.
like, I mean, isn't the whole point of like trying to keep a genre alive is by fucking making the genre itself, like just trying to do it, even if you're not even doing it well, at least just practicing and trying to improve on it. And I mean, just getting better in general. I mean, it's just all part of music itself, which is what I really have a problem with in terms of academics and how it sort of devalue or put and read jazz in general sort of like a dogmatic ideal as to what music was, because I don't think you really need uh, to, I mean, you can get a music degree and like learn like everything there is to know about music at a music college or whatnot, but I feel like jazz spirit in general is just comes from improvisation and just doing your own thing. It should be something that should be invited for everyone, and the fact that it's become this sort of like elitist music genre for academics to study sort of like takes away from its original spirit, I find.
Yeah, to a large degree, yeah, I do agree with that. I mean, and it's not even about like there are a lot of jazz outfits that are well, from a musical standpoint, they're really simple. I don't remember how it was called, but it's this German jazz band that is sort of exploring this dark jazz and or so-called doom jazz territory, where it's
Mm,
like it's essentially really slow and very simple, but
okay.
it sounds amazing. Like it's just really foreboding and very dark in that respect. And then you start analyzing it from a musical standpoint, from a theoretical standpoint even, and you realize that it's not really much going on in there. It's just I don't know, second year student could actually play the things that they do, and well,
Yeah.
to a large extent, and then it's like, huh, well, there you go. Like it doesn't require you to be like technically adept and educated in jazz. Well, maybe a little bit of education, sure, but I mean, you
Yeah.
don't need to be a master in order to play jazz and
No,
essentially
exactly.
make good jazz music. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's like the other aspect of it where like you said like a second year could play it, but could any second year think of that melody in general or like come up with that on the spot through improvisation, or are they just relying off of what they learned in school, like the very like specific chord progressions that you learn and practice over years, um, which to me kind of takes away from what jazz is, where you're sort of, if you're doing it improvisationally, you're sort of trying to find the vibe of the room you're in, sort of, just trying to go with the flow of what comes to you naturally instead of just relying off of your just rooted education of what comes after this, um, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah, because I feel like a lot of musicians who are like the really talented jazz artists were not talented because they studied a lot or they practiced a lot, but they had like just a natural gift in them to be able to play, beautiful melodies just on the spot. Um, and it's sort of like been carried with them throughout their lives. And you can like listen to like early recordings of them, even when they were not that skilled, and you still hear that same, um, I guess you would say like the energy of their music is still very much there, regardless of their technical skill, which anyone can learn really. But yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's sort of funny in that respect. Like it's a very interesting phenomenon in that respect because jazz
Hmm.
clearly it emerged as well, strictly non-academic genre. It essentially was a genre that was based on improvisation, and there was no underlying rules really. There was a specific sound, there was like these chord progressions that
Hmm.
were sort of like a convention, And then it sort of became like the academic musicians caught the genre, caught its sort of like its frame, got its frame, and then constructed sort of like a study around that. And you
Yeah.
know, and that frame is still left and still dragging on from those times, and it's not
Hmm.
changing. Like there's, and it's really interesting how this transformed. You know, when academics got, you know, caught that and sort of imprisoned it into this little box,
Yeah.
and then people are trying to learn jazz music by sort of exploring what's inside that box, and
Hmm.
it's a little bit weird. You know, it's quite difficult to explain coherently, but I mean, maybe you understand what I'm talking about. Like,
Yeah.
it's, well, I do understand that there's probably like there's two ways of how you can achieve like musical greatness. One of them, well, you have to be very talented and very creative, while the
Hmm.
other path is a little bit more difficult, I would even say, is to really work hard and try to explore music in that academic outlook in order to create something truly, you know, um, truly great. And well, like those two paths, I think, are really different in a sense, but you know, I'm still not sure whether any of them, like, well, the first path is quite clear that it's how the music originated and how it should be created, but the second path, like, well, maybe it can be applied to some music genres, but to some
Hmm.
not. I'm not really sure in that respect.
Yeah. And even if you do learn from the academic standpoint, the people who, get noticed or get attention are people who are going outside the box in general to begin with. Um, like Scott Joplin, who invented ragtime,
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like
yeah.
a perfect example, who like went to academia and like studied all kinds of classical music, but then when he started ragtime, he wasn't drawing off of his schoolwork. He was drawing off of, the music he heard in his environment,
Yeah.
um, and just adding that syncopation and the rhythm aspect that he heard, um, like in New Orleans when jazz was just starting to come about, and then made that ragtime sound. Um, and so yeah, I feel like there's no real like path really that's like better than the other. I think that like the best way to go about it is to just um do it on your own terms. Like you can learn as much as you can from someone else, but at the end of the day it's you're the one who's going to be uh has to go outside the box if you want to make something different. So like you can't make something new in a box where everything's already been done before. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and that's sort of like a good example of what I think. That's why I initially enjoy the minimalistic classical music. Philip
Hmm.
Glass comes to mind. Like this sort of like a similar like the music which is based on a classical roots, well, at least from the standpoint of just this melody and simple harmony and the instruments, but it's created in a way to convey like a very strong feeling, and you know, it's when you listen to, you do understand that it's, you know, high quality music. And that's why Philip Glass, even though he's a minimalist a composer, he's very highly acclaimed musician
Hmm.
and a composer, and his music is really simple in that respect. Like it doesn't really take you that much to learn to play his pieces, and it's
Yeah.
sort of like almost again the rebellion against the whole structure of just, you know, in order to be even a classical musician, you have to go through a very complex education, and you have
Hmm.
to create like very very complex music in order to be, you know, a great composer and so on.
Hmm. Yeah, which I never really understood, because I think it was Beethoven who said it, but like when you're trying to make something like music that's, poignant and good, is to take something, I guess, you have a complicated idea, and to simplify it down as much as possible. That specific idea, so you get like the raw part of what your music is trying to do, and that's what it is.
Oh, I think
So something like
it,
that.
it's kind of similar. It's kind of interesting because there's a similar thought, like in a scientific field. I'm not sure who actually told that, but it was also someone that told that the scientific idea has to be simplified as much as it can.
Yeah.
And that's the only, and that's the idea with Occam's razor as well. If you're familiar, it's sort of like a concept that the hypothesis and the theory has to be simplified as much as it can be, and then it can
Hmm.
be portrayed as the best theory that can be.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like a similar note. And
Hmm.
well, talking a little bit about classical music, do you have any sort of like, do you listen to classical music at all, or not?
Sometimes on occasion. I have like a Shostakovich album that I listen to, and then I have like just like these compilation albums. I don't know. I'm pretty impatient with myself in terms of listening to like full classical pieces because I mean, they're very long, obviously, some of them. But I mean, I do enjoy classical music from time to time. Just putting it on. It's very kind of like. Uh, I mean, it's just good to help me focus, I guess, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, oh, I'm quite glad that you mentioned Shostakovich. Like, I'm a huge fan of Shostakovich. Like, this is
Okay.
like a really great, especially his quartets. I think like string quartets. They're amazing. Like,
Okay.
that's interesting. Like, I see
Yeah.
that if I'm almost sure that some of that leaked into your own creations, like at least a very small part did, and maybe that also caught my attention. Okay, all right. So I think we can wrap this one up.
All
We've
right.
been, yeah, that was very nice talking to you. I'm
Yeah, it's
really
good.
happy to join me here, and absolutely
Hmm.
great. So now this podcast is going to be published in its entirety, so you can listen to it. I mean, well, I should have told that at the beginning of the podcast, but whatever. Anyways, the the shorter version is going to be transferred into a text file. It's going to be published as a post, so
Okay.
you can yeah, remember like the key points at least, or you can just listen to the whole thing. Yeah, it's going to be published anyway. So I'm really glad you came and joined me.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so